Hi, I'm Lisa Oberski, and I'm here at the Chaska History Center with Mr. Dave Johnson. Dave is a cabinet maker by trade and a woodworking guru in my mind, and also an expert on old woodworking and such tools. So when the immigrants would have come from their old country, they would have probably brought some of these tools with them so that they would be able to make a living in the new world. So, Dave, what can you tell me about these wonderful samples or examples of tools that you brought?
Just a small selection of some random mix of tools. I guess to start with, I've got a brace here and some bits. This is an old style brace, and you would put this bit in it, and you can just drill holes in a board like that. It's a really quick, rapid, you can reverse it and go forward. It's a rapid using tool. It's been around for many, many years.
Okay.
And it's still useful today. You can still buy them today and buy bits. But these are a little more rare. This is something else that you would put in the brace. This is a spoke pointer that you would put on the tip of a, say, a chair rung or leg, and you would put a point on the tip of it to get kind of started to a smaller circumference at the top, diameter. And then this would be the dowel rod tenon cutter that you would put into the brace as well, and it would cut the tenon.
Okay, so when you would use that original tool, it would come into a point, and then you cut out the point?
Kind of like a pencil sharpener.
Yeah, okay.
And it would create a point, which would give this a way to start cutting, because it can't just start on a blunt end like this. It needs to have kind of a pointed end to lead it on, to get it started. So once you get that point on, then you can start this down, and it'll create a little tenon on the end, which will correspond with the hole you previously drilled, in some cases with the brace, and create a mortise and tenon joint for, say, a chair leg or rail.
Okay. So those particular tools, they're used for a lot of different things, but one of the things
This is just an example of some of the things you could use it for.
Okay.
Maybe drill a series of holes and create a larger mortise for timber framing, building old barns, and or furniture, as well. So.
Okay, so
pretty versatile tool.
So mortise and tenon joints are still used today quite a bit?
Quite a bit.
Okay.
A lot of times they're more machine made, but a lot of people, there's been a popularity nowadays with a lot of hand tool, people getting back into it. And so you're starting to see a lot of people learning to do this by hand as well.
Okay.
Which then we come to the couple different saws. This is a staircase saw, and a lot of times the carpenters would use this to cut the runners for the stair treads to go into the staircase. And it just essentially would cut two curves in the side of that, and then you could take a router plane, set it to the desired depth you wanted, and lock it in and clean out the waste between the two cuts you previously made with either this saw or a back saw, which would be for the similar purpose. You could, and to create this, I used the back saw. First I scribed a line with a knife and give me a little shoulder for the saw to rest in and keep it a little more precise. And you cut two curves on either side to the desired width you want. And then once again, you come back with the router plane and clean out the waste, and you can set it for whatever depth you want that dado to be. And it's just a little more physical effort and time, but it gets the job done, and that's how they did it years ago. And the piece fits in there pretty snug.
Yeah. Why? I noticed that those different saws have different types of teeth.
Well, this is a little for coarser work. This is just will quick and fast and just get the job done quickly. It's gonna go in an area that maybe won't be generally seen. You don't have to be clean and perfect. This saw is a much more refined saw with finer teeth, and it gives a much cleaner, this is a saw I use here, it gives a much cleaner cut. This saw probably would have created a more jagged, rough looking cut. So it's just for the end result, the quality of the work, you might move up to a higher quality tool.
Okay. Now, so how would that router plane be held? How do you?
Well, you would clamp your work to your bench or whatever, and you would just essentially push it along like this. You might work your way down in increments. You don't want to try to hog it all out because it'll struggle with that. But if you got a nice sharp, blade in there, you can just work your way across and just plow your way down, lower it to whatever depth you wanted it to finish out to be. And some people have also used, like, say, a hinge mortise for a door. You can cut in your shoulders on that and just clean out the waste in between with a router plane as well to create that mortise for a hinge.
Do those router planes have wider blades and narrower blades?
You can, right. You can have 3/4, 1/4 inch. Some have pointed blades for a little more finer cutting. There's a large variety. Some do use these for cutting in, like, say, a little, you can put a fence on it and cut in a little narrow slot to lay in some inlay of different types of wood.
Okay.
So that's another, quite a versatile tool, and they're still available. Still, you can buy new ones from different places. They're very fine quality tools that you can find.
Okay.
We have a rabbet here on the back edge that this would be a skewed rabbet plane, which, being skewed, you could use it across the grain, but it doesn't have a nicker, which would be a blade that would be mounted into the plane here that would score the wood just ahead of the plane iron, and would also create a cleaner cut across the grain. You don't necessarily need it for going with the grain though, but here you would just maybe use a fingernail or something as a fence, and you would just run a little rabbet along the edge of a board for, say, to put a back of a cabinet into, or some kind of a joint for that. And once again, sometimes you can even use a finger here to create a depth stop for your depth. Some planes have, fences or depth stops that built into them, but this is just a basic skew rabbet plane.
Okay.
It's fairly versatile. And let's see, we got a bead molding plane here. It's just got a special iron in it with a little curve and a kerf point, and it's for creating this little bead detail on the edge of a board. You'll see that a lot in some wainscot paneling, or old style cabinet doors might have that on the center. It's got this boxwood insert in it, which is a very hard, durable wood, because it's a very thin part of the plane. It's got to be a durable piece of wood that will not be brittle and fall apart. And that essentially, you put it up against the edge of the board, and you start along and work your way. Sometimes you start from the front and work your way back. It's always helpful to have the grain going in the right direction. And but you just work your way down until it bottoms out, and then it's done. And it's a nice decorative look. Sometimes you can put a groove in there and have a tongue and groove, beadboard, detail with that. And this is just a nice old Danish smooth plane, horned smooth plane. They call it a horned plane because it's got a nice handle on it. And it's essentially for finishing up a board. It gives a very nice smooth surface. You can almost disregard the sanding portion of it because it cuts it so cleanly it feels like glass. If it's very sharp, that is. You gotta have a sharp iron, of course. That's helpful. But, some, in some cases, you can just use a smooth plane and be done. From that point on, you can just apply the finish, and it's a beautiful, provides a beautiful finish. This one here is a jack plane, which is another step that you would probably use prior to the smooth plane. It's for flattening and leveling boards. They make bigger tri-planes and joiner planes, which are like 24 inches long. And that's for getting a straight edge on a board, or for flattening, the surface of a board prior to moving to a smooth plane to finish it up.
Quick question. You mentioned sanding it. How long have people been sanding?
Well,
because sandpaper obviously hasn't been around forever.
I think all the way back to the Egyptian times.
Really?
I think they were utilizing some of the sand. They found that if you threw it on a piece of wood and rubbed it around, it would, clean it up a little bit. So that's an ancient technology.
Wow, I didn't realize that. Okay.
This is just a sliding Tbevel, more or less just for determining angles. Say you got to figure out an angle on a board, you can set this up and lock it down and determine some of your angles and transfer that to another board. So, for cutting joinery, or say determining pitch on a roof, or, it's a pretty versatile tool. It's handy to have around. Takes some of the guesswork, and it falls apart occasionally. But this is a very old one too.
So is that what would be used instead of, say, a protractor or a...
Possibly. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll take a sliding Tbevel if I'm trying to determine an angle, and I will set it up on, say, a layout that I have created. And I'll lay it on there on my layout, and then I'll go over to my miter box and I'll
match it.
Move the miter box to the angle to match this up, and that will tell me what angle I need it in.
Okay.
So it's a helpful tool for just determining angle. This is an old Yankee, the Cordless Drill predecessor. And simple for driving screws. You can go forward or reverse, and it sped things up quite a bit out in the field back in the day. You can also lock it in the middle, and it will just turn on its own like a traditional screwdriver. Handy tool, but nowadays you don't see people using them so much because, of course, we have all the cordless tools available, and drill drivers, and speeds things up even more. So.
And then we have two more.
Yeah, this is just an adjustable wrench, old style, and it's pretty versatile because if you got a stubborn nut that doesn't want to come loose, you can always beat on it with a hammer.
Progressive maintenance.
Obviously, this has been mushroomed over a little bit, so that's exactly what it's been used for. But it's just kind of unique. You don't see them around too much. Well, you see these a lot in antique shops, but there's nobody that makes this particular style anymore. But it's just kind of a unique tool to, have around. It's just fun to look at sometimes, and maybe you can actually use it occasionally if in a pinch. But
okay.
This is a double spoke shave. Comes with a straight and a concave cutter. They're fairly common. I think you can still find them today. And it's for shaping legs. Say you have a square piece of wood, you want to turn it, make it round, or put some chamfers on it, and you would essentially pull it towards you more than likely, but you can push it as well. And it's for chair work, spoke shave, for spokes on a wheel, things like that. So other versatile tool. Like I say, you can still find those. All of these are still. Some people do make wooden planes. In Germany, they make wooden hand planes still. In fact, in this style as well. So a lot lot of these are still available to this day, but it's always fun to find an old one and make it work again, you know.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for the introduction to antique tools.
Thank you.
And next time you see some in an antique store, you might be able to say, ah, that's a spoke shave.
Yep.
Or whatever the case might be.
Sometimes you can find real bargains, and they're easy to salvage as well, and put them back to use again.
Cool. Okay, thank you.